All right, I'm going to break in now with the news that we promised to bring you. This is the Roosevelt Room at the White House. The president giving a Civil War veteran posthumously the Medal of Honor. Let's watch and listen.
So this medal is a reminder that no matter how long it takes, it is never too late to do the right thing. Alonzo, or Lon Cushing, was raised by his widowed mother in Fredonia, New York, with his siblings, including 3 brothers who also fought for the Union. As the congressman who recommended Lon to West Point wrote, his mother is poor but highly committed, and her son will do honor to the position. After graduating from West Point, Lon was assigned to Battery A, 4th United States Artillery. From Bull Run to Antietam, from Chancellorsville to Fredericksburg, Lon fought bravely and developed a reputation for his cool, his competence, and his courage under fire. But it was at Gettysburg, what one newspaper later called emphatically a soldier's battle, where Lon would be immortalized. It was July 3rd, 1863, the final day of a grueling 3-day fight. Lon commanded his battery along the wall on Cemetery Ridge, fending off punishing fire from General Lee's Confederate troops in advance of what we now know as Pickett's charge. In the chaos and smoke, Lon and his men could barely see ahead of them. One colonel later described the terrible grandeur of that rain of missiles and that chaos of strange and terror-spreading sounds. Lon was hit and badly wounded. His first sergeant, a soldier by the name of Frederick Fugger, urged him to go to the rear, but Lon refused and said he'd fight it out or die in the attempt. Bleeding and weak, he moved his remaining guns closer to the front. Over 10,000 Confederate infantrymen advanced, elbow to elbow, in rows over a mile wide. Peering through field glasses, Lon ordered his men to continue firing at the advancing columns. He used his own thumb to stop his gun's vent, burning his fingers to the bone. When he was hit the final time, as a poet later wrote, his guns spoke out for him once more before he fell to the ground. And Alonzo Cushing was just 22 years old. In a letter to Lon's sister, Fugger wrote that the bravery of their men that day was entirely due to your brother's training and example set on numerous battlefields. Etched on Lon's tombstone at West Point is the simple epitaph, "Faithful unto death." And his memory will be honored later this month when one of our Navy's cruisers, the USS Gettysburg, dedicates its officers' dining hall as the Cushing wardroom. And here today we know that Lon and the others who fell that day could not. We know what they could not. That Gettysburg was a turning point in the Civil War. It's also proof, if any was needed, that it was thousands of unknown young soldiers committing unsung acts of heroism who saved our Union and freed a people and reaffirmed our nation as one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm mindful that I might not be standing here today as president had it not been for the ultimate sacrifices of those courageous Americans. Today we honor just one of those men, Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing, who, as Lincoln said, gave their last full measure of devotion. His story is part of our larger American story, one that continues today. The spirit, the courage, the determination that he demonstrated lives on in our brave men and women in uniform who this very day are serving and making sure that they are defending the freedoms that Alonzo helped to preserve. And it's incumbent on all of us as Americans to uphold the values that they fight for and to continue to honor their service long after they leave the battlefield, for decades, even centuries to come. So with that, I'd like to ask Helen to join me for the reading of the citation.
The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3rd, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to First Lieutenant Alonzo H. Cushing, United States Army. First Lieutenant Alonzo H. Cushing distinguished himself by acts of bravery above and beyond the call of duty while serving as an artillery commander in Battery A, 4th U.S. Artillery, Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on July 3, 1863, during the American Civil War. That morning, Confederate forces led by General Robert E. Lee began cannonading 1st Lieutenant Cushing's position on Cemetery Ridge. Using field glasses, 1st Lieutenant Cushing directed fire for his own artillery battery. He refused to leave the battlefield after being struck in the shoulder by a shell fragment. As he continued to direct fire, he was struck again, this time suffering grievous damage to his abdomen. Still refusing to abandon his command, he boldly stood tall in the face of Major General George E. Pickett's charge and continued to direct devastating fire into oncoming forces. As the Confederate forces closed in, 1st Lieutenant Cushing was struck in the mouth by an enemy bullet and fell dead beside his gun. His gallant stand and fearless leadership inflicted severe casualties upon Confederate forces and opened wide gaps in their lines, directly impacting the Union forces' ability to repel Pickett's charge. 1st Lieutenant Cushing's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty at the cost of his own life are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, Battery A, 4th U.S. Artillery, Army of the Potomac, and the United States Army.
Just a tremendous story of bravery. And you might be asking why this is happening now. In Cushing's home state of Wisconsin, there was a delegation of state leaders there who worked with others, just average citizens, who were concerned that this story would have gone unnoticed and that this medal needed to happen. So they passed a bill taking an exception to all the decades that have passed, because it's been nearly 15 decades since he died, to make this happen. President Obama this summer approved that this award would happen. And then the Army had to search and search and search for relatives of Alonzo Cushing. And so there are a couple of cousins, and you see Helen there to the left or to the right of the president accepting the pinning here. But this is a huge journey that has taken place to have this happen today. Cushing's family is well known in the military. In fact, his younger brother, William, is labeled as the first Navy SEAL by some historians. His brother, Howard, as well, fought in the military. So he comes from a long military lineage. And as we go to break now, we remember him and the Medal of Honor bestowed upon Army Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing.